Hello guys, and welcome to a new Steel Division video today by me, Vulcan. Today I have for you the battle group overview of the 1st Pancerna, or the 1st Armoured Polish Division. And in this one, I'm going to be talking through how I feel this deck should be used. A lot of people perceive it to be one of the weakest decks, and I can see why. But once I talk you guys through how I use it, I think I might be able to convince you guys to use it more often. I think it's actually a relatively well-rounded deck that can be quite effective in certain situations, and I'll talk through them as we go. So let's start off in the Recon Tab. So the Recon Tab's pretty standard. You get your standard 4-man scouts, which are great to just be a bit more robust and basically stick around a lot longer than your 2-man infantry squads. Can be used to sit in like buildings and hard points and stuff like that, like forest tree lines and so on. Just like predictable places. They might get mortared, but you can generally save them because they have 4 strength. Very good stealth and very high optics, you know, pretty standard stuff. 25 points, really nice cheap infantry squad for the beginning of the game. Then moving on to the Zwiadowski. These guys have 2-man infantry squads, recon. These are the sort of guys you hide in little bushes and hedgerows. Make sure they basically never get spotted, otherwise they die basically. And they come with a 30 cal Jeep, which is useful at 600 meter range, but if you get them any closer, they can be popped off very quickly. And the main issue with these Jeeps is MG42s. You know, MG42s will be able to destroy these Jeeps at long range very easily. So be careful what you're going up against with these Jeeps, or you'll just lose them for free, when they can actually be pretty useful, not just for attacking enemy units, but also for holding the front line where you need to. If you hide them behind like a tree line, then they can provide presence on the front line without actually, you know, having to do too much combat, which is nice. Then moving on, probably the best thing about the 1st Pancerna is that they do get these recon Stuarts in the Recon Tab, which is really nice. And they have the standard 3 30 caliber machine guns and the main gun. A little less armor than your generic Stuarts, the M5A1s, but still very good. This is the M3A3, I believe. With the recon variant with the high optics, and this allows you to do one of the strategies that I've started to do with the Polish, and that's the 3-tank strategy, which provides recon with your Stuart, like a recon Stuart. Then you get a command Stuart plus a Cromwell at the start of the game, and I found that combination to be extremely good. So that's the reason I bring in both these Stuarts at the start. Furthermore, they are 1-star veterancy with a command unit nearby that makes them 2-star veterancy Stuarts at the start of the game, which is actually pretty damn strong. Now you can get access to the Morris LRC, which is a very interesting little vehicle with quite high speed. However, this boy's AT rifle not going to do too much, and the Bren gun's kind of useless as well. So all in all, pretty pointless unit for 45 points. Maybe if they made it a bit cheaper, people might start using them, but in general, not really worth it. Just an interesting looking little vehicle. Then we have some more recon going into phase B, but that's just more availability on your initial cards, alongside just different carriers. So there's Zwiadowski come in the carrier ZCKM, which is basically the MMG carrier with the Vicars attached. And then the Zwiadowski come in the M3 Scout car with the 50 cal. And both of these are interesting choices if you have maybe some extra activation points. But in my case, I just don't find they find space in my deck. And by phase B, recon Stuarts really not up to par compared to anything you're going to come up against, and will just end up being a liability more than anything because they only have high optics. In phase A, you can get away with it. Moving into phase B and C, definitely not. So if you're going to add like a 5th card of recon, add probably the Zwiadowski in the M3 Scout car, because the 50 cal can be so useful. Although this Vickers MMG carrier can do a lot of damage as well, has a lot of HE power available. By the way, that's pretty much the Recon tab. Let's move on to the Infantry tab. So the Recon tab, as the Polish, is pretty much just fodder. That's pretty much it. And you can see that I have quite a high focus on availability of fodder, as I like to call it. So you got your rifles here, standard Strelzy. These guys, yeah, just run up, draw enemy fire, and then you use your fire support to crush enemy units, and then put these into annoying positions. That's literally what the rifles are used for in this battle group, more than any other battle group that uses rifle squads. And then you have your Vicar Squads for more defensive play, generally, or if you're trying to contest a town, if you can keep these on target at 500 meter range, they can actually do quite a lot of damage. And then also in Phase A, I have access to the Command Infantry with the Piat, which is quite important for supporting, again, town pushes and so on. And they come with a command carrier, which is 1 star, which changes to 2 star once they drop out, since they gain the extra veterancy on the command carrier. And that can be extremely useful as well. So, yeah, this command carrier, quite nice, and this combo, well, is a good addition to the start of the game. Dragoni only having 3 availability at the start, even with a half track available, in my opinion, isn't really worth it. You just want to be spamming as many rifles as you can, and then providing fire support from other areas of your battle group. Moving into Phase B, again, more rifle availability. I am starting to bring in some Dragoni in Phase B. Like, they're actually relatively cheap combo, like 2020, with the 7-man infantry or 8-man infantry squads, with the Piat available and a Bren gun, which is an interesting combo, plus the M5 half track. Not too bad. They're actually pretty nice squads if used correctly, but you've got to be careful. They can get pinned down and killed relatively easy. The Piat's kind of terrible, so don't rely on that either. Like, generally I just prefer to bring in rifles simply because they have more strength and are better fodder than Dragoni are. Dragoni are the sort of guys you want to try and keep alive and use them for more like a specialist role. Like, basically use the Piat. That's what they're there for. Then I also have a 1 card of the Superzi. These are 10-man napalm squads. If you're going to be fighting into forests and you're finding you're having some trouble moving into Phase B, then Superzi are where you're going to go to try and deal with that, because they have that 100-meter range napalm launcher. So yeah, really nice. Flamethrower, going to do the job. And they also come in a half track, which is never a bad thing, really. It can make squads cost too much sometimes, but in general, half tracks are a welcome addition. And in Phase B, 5 squads of Superzi, not going to complain. They can actually do the job. If we move on to tanks now, again, this is basically going back to what I said before, with the 3-tank Polish strategy, which is the Recon Stuart, the Stuart 5, and the Cromwell 5. So the Stuart 5 is an M4A or M3A3, I believe, which is the old Stuart variant. And this one's a Command Stuart, and basically can buff the Recon Stuarts to 2 stars. And that's really, really nice. It also buffs the Cromwell 5 to 2 stars, which is, again, really, really useful. So this can be like a really nice combo. Just make sure that you keep the Command Stuart the safest whilst you're moving the triple threat around. Now that's pretty much all I'm going to be bringing in Phase A, because you're going to be probably buying both of your Recon Stuarts plus probably both of your Command Stuarts in Phase A, and that's already a lot of points. And the Pancerna, they do get 90 points in, or like requisition points per minute in Phase A, which is actually a relatively high amount. So you can definitely pop these tanks out quite often. The Cromwell 5 is more of like a supplement if you're coming up against enemy like light vehicles, especially like German light vehicles, and also even like heavier units. Sometimes a Cromwell can really come in handy. Has a decent rate of fire and accuracy. Then moving into Phase B, well, this is where I'm pretty much just going to be bringing in 2 cards of Sherman 3 command tanks, and these guys are really nice as infantry fire support more than anything else, and they supplement a lack of command in this deck, because if I jump to the support tab, I mean, I do have the M3 commands available, but these Shermans are very much better at that role, and if I can afford a Sherman to provide me with command radius, I generally will, especially in this deck, because it kind of needs as much help as it can get. I also have a card of the Sherman 5s, because they are 1-star veteran C. These are the 3 availability ones as opposed to the 5 availability ones. And yeah, 2-star veteran C with a command unit nearby. It's quite a nice unit to have. It does have improved armor as well, all round. So yeah, just a nice, again, fire support vehicle. Bring it in to support your infantry. If you need the command radius, bring the Sherman 3s. If not, then bring the Sherman 5s. Other choices for Phase B include the Command Cromwell. This is a 2-star Command Cromwell. I just find that the Cromwells get outscaled so easily moving into Phase B. And if we look at the Phase C, well, I've just got 2 1-star Fireflies. Doesn't give me many availabilities of Fireflies, but I generally don't find that Fireflies in Phase C are effective enough to deal with German armour. If you're looking at a Firefly taking on a Panther, for example, the Panther has 14 front armour, so you have 2 more AP than armour, whereas a Panther has 6 more AP than armour, since it has a 17 AP power gun. The Panther is so much more likely to penetrate your Firefly than your Firefly is that Panther. So be careful about using these Fireflies moving into the mid to late game, because they're not all they're shaped up to be sometimes. Just be really careful. We move on to the support tab. This is where things really start to get fun with this deck. It does have access to multiple Cromwells in Phase A. And these guys, these Cromwell 6s with the 13 HE power and 1200 meter range are so good. I really love using these Cromwell 6s. They're just so much fun to use, really powerful, can take on most AT gun, Phase A AT guns at least, without being in range. And alongside like a Recon Stuart and stuff, these guys can do so much damage, it's incredible. Now there's also access to deep 30 cal or deep 50 cals in Phase A, if you had the space maybe, but generally I try to avoid Jeeps because they're so fragile. And then we have the Stag Hounds, which are just plain overpriced right now. Very fast, 8 AP power. Can be good if you like a good rush. You know, bring in some of these, bring in like 4 or 5 of these at the start of the game and just rush down the road at 95 km/h speed, and you're going to do a reasonable amount of damage if you don't get popped to pieces by AT guns. But either way, I just don't recommend them at all. Rely on your Stuarts, not your Stag Hounds. That's what I say. That's my motto. If we move into Phase B, you get access to command cars and more 50 cal Jeeps and some more supply. I do bring in supply in Phase A, but in Phase B all I'm choosing is the M3 command, because it's just useful to have more command sometimes. That's pretty much it. These Cromwell 6s really making the deck very fun, but I'll talk more about that when we come to the end. So if we move into anti-tank, we're looking at a deck that's quite lacking in anti-tank, honestly, because it is an armoured deck. They're supposed to rely more on their tanks. However, I feel like the 17 pounders are so necessary in this deck that I've almost been tempted to like drop out Achilles in the past for more 17 pounders. In Phase A, 6 pounders do the job. You get 3 of them, it's generally enough. You're going to be having a lot of tanks around anyway. So these sort of just plug your holes where you're playing a bit more defensively. Moving into Phase B, you get access to Achilles, and I think they're definitely worth having in Phase B because they can do so much damage compared to some of the German armour that can be brought in. So Panzer IVs, for example, will melt at the sight of an Achilles. Same with like Stugs. You know, Achilles will do the job with a 16 AP power. and that's something that's really nice. Just make sure they do have a command unit nearby, otherwise they're not going to really be hitting too much, which can be a problem. Now, other things you can get include Piats, just don't. Waste of a slot in my opinion. And then just like one availability cards of 17 pounders, again not really worth it in my opinion. Moving into phase C, however, the two availability of the 17 pounders, definitely. These are the guys you're going to use to ambush enemy like King Tigers and Heavy Panthers basically. Make sure they are on return fire and just allow them to sit there, get on target, and then just pop those tanks as best they can. That's pretty much my AT tab. Not the best. I don't really like the AT so much, like the limited amount of activation points you can put it into anti-tank. I don't like that about this deck, but in general I think it's pretty well rounded from the way I've set it up. We jump into anti-air. This is again where things get fun with this division. We have the Crusader AA Mark 28 or Mark 2B, sorry, available, and these guys have a Tripolston attached to the top of a Crusader tank, which is pretty damn badass. And these have 999 rounds per minute rate of fire with 13 HE power. Bring one of these in to support your troops early in the game, and you're going to be stunning enemy troops very quickly, and also just tearing apart enemy infantry. Something that I've actually tended to use this for quite often. Now moving into phase B, you get access to Crusader AA Mark IIs, the standard ones. These guys have 810 rounds per minute rate of fire and 11 HE. Excuse me just a second while I take a drink of water. It is actually really hot today. But yeah, getting away from the point. 810 rate of fire and yeah, 11 HE. So really strong. Basically a Tripolston, but just with one less cannon. And these guys are just as armoured as a Crusader AA Mark 2B and destroy infantry on the ground. You get plenty of availability really to not only destroy ground units, but also to really rip apart air units as well. So take full advantage of them, and I do definitely in phase C when you can get a card of 5 more. Pretty much anything that flies over 5 Crusader AA Mark IIs is going to get shot down. Just be aware of that. So moving on to artillery. The artillery tab is, well, it leaves a lot to be desired, especially in terms of comparison to other decks. A lot of the allied decks have pretty damn strong off-map artillery, but the Polish certainly aren't one of them. They gain access to the 2-inch mortars in phase A that I do take just because they are fast firing and do provide you with fire support where needed alongside smoke support. And I don't really find that I'm ever going to pay enough points to get a sexton in phase A. Otherwise I probably would, but I don't. So I don't tend to use these sextons in phase A. I tend to end up bringing them up in phase B, which is a complete waste of a card at the end of the day. So instead I opted to go for the mortars, which are only 70 points in phase A. And these guys can provide you with smoke and the fire support where you need it. Moving into phase B, I do gain a card of the 25 pounders. I think it's important to have the 2,400 meter range artillery, as well as one card of the sextons. Now the main difference between like a sexton and a 25 pounder gun is that 25 pounder guns are actually harder to get rid of in my opinion than sextons, because sextons can be like blown up by like penetration from like even just an aircraft, right? Whereas like a 25 pounder 6 strength is even survives, counter battery a lot better than maybe a sexton does. So I don't know, they both have their own uses, depends really how you want to use them. You can also set up a 25 pounders in forests and so on, so that keeps them a little bit more safe. Now mortars in phase B, I've always said they're useless and I'll continue to do so. Moving into phase C, again more mortars are completely useless. Sherman 5 with the 140mm off-map artillery, completely useless. This off-map artillery literally does nothing. It's like peppering the enemy with dust. And then their machine guns on this, not having a main gun available, makes the Sherman kind of useless as well. And then you can get more sections in phase C as well, but you know, you don't need the availability by then. I don't generally find myself using artillery that often with this deck. Moving into the air tab, this is again more interesting stuff about the Polish. They actually have hurricanes, which are awesome. So in phase A, you get 2 1-star hurricanes, and these guys can seriously do a lot of damage. They have 4 20mm cannons at the start of phase A, and that's a lot of firepower to be bringing in against enemy aircraft. They are relatively slow, but they have good agility, and if they get on the back of an opposing plane, they will shoot them down, like no doubt about it. Moving into phase B, you can gain access to 2-star Mustangs Mark IIIs, but I feel like since you don't have much activation points in this deck, and you also suffer from like availability of planes in general, Mustang Mark IIIs, even though there's 2 stars, just don't seem worth it to me when you can get a card of 2 of them in phase C. And in phase B, I'm just basically getting a couple of these Hurricane bombers, even though they're not even that good. 2 15 HE power bombs is enough to like blow up a AT gun or something for you, but I don't know, they're so slow. 450 km/h speed. I've seen these guys get intercepted so many times that I actually have stopped bringing them in. But I do find a use for them sometimes. It's just most of the time, if you lose air supremacy, these guys are so useless. Like at least some like lightnings and stuff are fast enough that they can still hit their target and get out before they get intercepted, but Hurricane's definitely not. You can also get rocket versions with the 8 HE rockets. These are your standard like anti-infantry and anti-support weapon rockets, as opposed to anti-tank rockets, so don't rely on them for that. But either way, that's pretty much your choice. You take veteran Hurricanes or not, and I think availability for any like ground attack aircraft is just better. Moving into phase C, yeah, the 2-star Mustangs are definitely a choice because they allow you to reassert air control moving into phase C. And then also a card of Mosquitoes, because although 10 HE power bombs is often underwhelming and just stuns and panics enemy units, it can be useful in certain situations, especially like against like a King Tiger, for example. Often the best way to deal with the King Tiger is literally just to bomb it and make sure it's panicked for the rest of the game, so it's completely useless. And Mosquitoes are one way of doing that. Furthermore, Mosquitoes can be used as interceptors with 600 km/h speed. Just be aware that their agility is bad, so don't make them dogfight against a BF-109, for example. And that's pretty much it. That's the deck. That's the all of my unit choices there. Let's talk through how I actually play the deck. So with this deck, it's probably one of the main allied armoured decks that actually, you know, uses armoured units quite a lot. I find that a really strong combination is the 3-tank strategy I was talking about earlier, which is the Recon Stuart, the Command Stuart, and the Cromwell. This Cromwell can really do a lot of damage in phase A if it's not countered by an AT gun or something. But further to that, the Cromwell 6s. If you're finding you're up against like long range AT guns or just AT guns in general, Cromwell 6s can really help you out. They can do loads of damage to infantry, and pretty much the majority of my early game will be a combination of Recon Stuarts, Command Stuarts, and Cromwells. Both the Cromwell 6s and the Cromwell 5. And that's just literally because the rest of my stuff will just be rifle squads, which are really cheap. My Recon will be the Stuarts and also the Zwiadowsi. And then you can get relatively cheap AT guns, and you can bring in the Crusade AA if you need it, but I don't know if I tend to bring it in too often. It depends on the situation. If I'm pushing into a town, Crusader AA Mark IIB is actually pretty damn decent alongside a 2-inch mortar. So that's why you would bring in those chaps. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, that's what Phase A is all about. Using your armor to really make like nice combined pushes, and use your recon to discover AT. Actually allow some of your stuff to get shot at, so you can shoot it with Cromwell 6s and blow it up. Use your rifles to draw fire from the opponents and slam them with your Stuarts and all those 30 cals that you have access to. Really, really good and effective in Phase A. I actually find that the Phase A in this deck is quite powerful, and people say that the veterancy of the infantry really matters in this deck, but I don't think it does. I don't think that you need to have the veterancy on these rifle squads to make a difference with this battle group, because it relies so much on fire support and armoured vehicles, and that's something that I feel that a lot of people don't understand about it. Anyway, moving into Phase B, it's all about what do you need. If you need replacements for your command tanks, then bring in Sherman 3s. If not, you might be able to spend a bit more to get Sherman 5s. And Sherman 5s are nice because of their extra armour, which can make a big difference against some German AT guns. Also, more fodder is available now, so you can bring in more rifles. And if you're coming up against heavier tanks, but not heavy like Panthers, if they're more like Panzer IVs or Stugs, Achilles might be the way to go. If you're dealing with units in tree lines, and or maybe you're struggling with anti-air, then Crusader AA Mark IIs are the way to go. And these can help your Hurricanes win dogfights that they would otherwise lose. You can start to bring in some more artillery in Phase B to start to dislodge annoying positions or start to counter battery. So that's something to do. And they're also fantastic, the 25-pounder and Sexton, for taking care of Flak 88s. So be well aware of that, because that's pretty much the only counter that you have to them in this deck. Moving into Phase C, set up those AT guns before you buy the Fireflies. Fireflies, you can buy them if you are up against inadequate guns like Stugs again, or maybe just more Panzer IVs, or even if you're playing against a deck that doesn't have too much armor, a Firefly you can really exploit the game with a Firefly. But if you're up against King Tigers and Panthers, just keep your Fireflies like in your battle group, don't bring them out onto the field. Just rely on other things like your 17-pounder, your Mustangs and your Mosquitoes and stuff. These guys will be able to like stress enemy tanks, especially like the bombers, and then you just want to be like ambushing them with the 17-pounders. I find that the way I build this deck is it actually suffers quite a lot into Phase C, but you can make a lot of ground in Phase A if you use it properly. And since it does have 90 requisition points available in Phase A, it can be rather potent. But either way, that's my talk through the first Pancerna, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. I'd love to know what you guys think of my particular battle group. I don't play it very often, but I have been having fun with the whole 3-tank strategy I've been talking about. Either way, yeah, let me know what your battle groups look like. Let me know your thoughts. But that's all. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.